Hey you guys, welcome back to my channel. I am so excited for today's video because we're going to be ranking the last 9 palettes that I personally have tried. I have so many fun palettes to share my ranking with you guys on today, and I will be doing my official palette ranking system for these 9 palettes. So I essentially have 4 separate categories that I give a numerical value to these palettes, and then they end up with a final score, whatever it might be, and that is how I have ranked these palettes. For the end of the year, I am just going to be doing like ranking based on my personal like feelings on each of the palettes. Obviously this does have like my own personal feelings in it, but I'm not going to do this official ranking system for the end of the year. So if you're worried about that, don't worry. I'm not doing that. But I thought for like these, like every now and again, like ranking the last, you know, anywhere from like 5 to 10 palettes I've tried, it's fun, at least in my opinion, to do this like official palette ranking system. We are ranking the palettes based on their quality, color story, packaging, as well as their price. So if you're interested, stay tuned. First, if you have yet to subscribe to my channel and you like project painting content or just chit-chatting about makeup, I'd love if you'd consider subscribing before moving on. And other than that, let's jump into the video. All right, you guys, in order for a palette to be ready to rank, in my opinion, I need to have used the palette I need to have used every shade in the palette at least 1 time. I really try and hit every shade at least like 3 times, especially if it's a shade that I feel like has been giving me some troubles. I like to like try and use the shade a few times just so I can see if it was maybe just that 1 time or if it truly is a shade that like gives me trouble. As I mentioned, I have 4 separate categories that these palettes are ranked based on, and I had posted something on my YouTube community tab a few months ago asking you guys what you're really looking for when you are looking for a good quality palette. So quality is the most important, and for quality a palette can score up to 7 points, and there's a bunch, you know, all of this is super subjective, but within quality, there's things like blendability, pigmentation, etc. There's so many things that fall into that quality category. Then I rank the palette based on color story, and a palette can get up to 5 points in the color story category. Again, this is going to be super subjective to whoever it is that's using the palette, but just again, a fun way to rank these palettes. Third is packaging. A palette can rank up to 3 points in packaging. And finally, based on the price per gram of the palette, a palette can lose points. So a palette can get up to 15 points with quality, color story, and packaging. And then based on its price, if it is less than $1 price per gram, it loses 0 points. If it is $1 to $2 price per gram, it loses 1 point. $2 to $5 loses 2 points, and then $5 plus it loses 3 points for an official ranking at the end. And I'm going to share with you guys based on the worst all the way to the best, and I really enjoy pretty much every palette that I'm ranking today. So just bear that in mind. But coming in number 9, we actually have the Pat McGrath Subliminal palette, and I've actually really enjoyed this palette. This is what Pat McGrath Subliminal looks like, and in terms of quality, I did give this a 6 out of 7. My only gripe with Pat McGrath shadows is I don't think she has the most blendable mattes, and I feel like when you're paying over $100 for an eyeshadow palette, like you should be getting the most buttery, smooth, easy to blend mattes. So that's why I docked 1 point for that. Overall, I really do like the majority of these shades. I had a little bit of issues with this specific matte shade just being a little bit patchy. In terms of color story, I actually ended up giving this a 3 out of 5, and I have loved all of the looks that I've created with this palette, but I think when you look into this palette, it just looks so dull and so boring. I remember when the Pat McGrath Motherships first launched, I was like, who would ever buy this palette? It looks like the most boring palette I've ever seen. Now, I will say I definitely do have an appreciation for cool toned shadows, as I do have more cool toned skin. It's like the perfect time because there's so many cool toned palettes releasing. I feel like if this were to re-release now, it would be all the rage. Anyway, because it's like not very inspiring to look at, I gave it a 3 out of 5. And then in terms of packaging, I did give this a 2 out of 3. It is really luxe, really weighted. I like the mirror. My only complaint with this is, one, I wouldn't want to travel with this palette, obviously because it is so expensive to begin with, but it is, and I will say, I don't want to say that because I do like the weightiness to this. My complaint with the Pat McGrath packaging is that she has these really beautiful outer packages for each of the palettes with like, they're just so beautiful, but then each palette looks like this and you can't differentiate between your mothership palettes. So I docked a point for that. And then, as we know, Pat McGrath palettes are quite expensive. They come in at $6.56 price per gram, which puts this at an 8 for its official palette ranking. I still really enjoy this palette. I think it's absolutely beautiful, but it's an 8. Okay, you guys, then I actually had 4 palettes tied with a final score of 11. So for that, the palette that cost the least amount price per gram came in higher than those that cost more price per gram. So coming in at number 8, I have the What's Up Beauty Desert Monsoon palette. I have been so impressed with the What's Up Beauty formula. I think their shimmer slash metallic formula is so good. It's so smooth and so foiled. If you don't like intense, I don't think you'll like it, but I have really enjoyed this palette. I don't really have any complaints in terms of quality. I gave this a 7. I didn't have any issues with blending. I think every single shade within this palette is really beautiful. There's definitely a range of finishes amongst the metallics. Like Glow is a little bit more subtle, a little bit more sheeny, whereas like Sun is so intense and so foiled on the lids, but so beautiful. For Color Story, I did give this a 4 out of 5. I feel like I really like the shimmers, but I feel a little bit confused when I'm thinking through, like, I don't know why we included this like pink matte. Really, if that wasn't there, and maybe we replaced that with something different, maybe even like a khaki green to try and like tie like the greens in. I just feel like this pink throws me off. So I did deduct 1 point for Color Story. And then for packaging, I gave this a 2 out of 3. It does have a mirror. It is a little bit smaller, and I just think like it's not like the best packaging I've ever experienced, but also not like the worst by any means. And then price per gram, this comes in at $3.72 price per gram, which gives us a final ranking of 11. Overall, really impressed with this though. I think I actually like Desert Monsoon more than Geodes. I like both of them, but I've been really impressed with What's Up Beauty in general as a brand. Okay, you guys, this next palette coming in at number 7 literally costs a penny more price per gram than what's coming in at 5 and 6, which are tied. So coming in at number 7, we have the Glaminatrix Cosmetics Nocturnal palette. I am so in love with Glaminatrix. It's like one of my newest favorite eyeshadow brands. This is what the Nocturnal palette looks like. It is absolutely stunning. I feel like this is such a perfect color story for spooky season, and overall just I really enjoyed the Glaminatrix formula. In terms of quality, I did give this a 6 out of 7. I did struggle a little bit with Nightfall and a little bit with Obscurity. I will also say with the Glaminatrix mattes, they definitely are a little bit less pigmented. Like they look super pigmented in the pan, but they definitely take a little bit more building. I don't think that's a bad thing, but it's definitely something to note and point out. But because I had a little bit issues with these 2 mattes, I did dock 1 point for quality. In terms of Color Story, I did give this a 5 out of 5. I feel like everything like makes sense. I also liked like the way that they laid it out. There's not one shade in here that I personally would switch out. I mean, I don't necessarily care for a black, but I feel like it definitely makes sense in this palette. And then in terms of packaging, I gave this a 2 out of 3. I do feel like Glaminatrix has made some serious improvements to their packaging. This just feels a little bit cheap. I don't know how to describe, like it's like foam here. But I do like their like leather exterior. They have kept with the leather exterior, but I just prefer their newer packaging to this. It's just thicker than it needs to be. So I did dock a point for packaging. And then in terms of price per gram, this comes in at $2.10 price per gram. So the official ranking score of this was also an 11. 5 and 6 are tied, dead even, but from the same collection. It is the Oden's Eye and Angelica Halloween collection, the Trick or Treat and the Little Ghost palette. I have had so much fun creating looks with these. I will say when these first launched, I knew I was going to get them because I want every Oden's Eye palette. I love Oden's Eye, my favorite eyeshadow brand, and there's been a couple palettes I've skipped in the past and I definitely regretted it, but I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna get like a ton of use out of these, just because I'm like, color story wise, I'm not the most artistic, like I don't know what to necessarily do. Now I definitely have followed some of Angelica's like tutorials or just her creating looks with these palettes, but I've also had so much fun just like creating things on my own as well. I have quite a few looks with both of these. So both of these I scored the exact same. For quality, I gave each of them a 6. I will say with Odenseye, there's always inevitably just like a matte that just gives me like a little bit of trouble. So specifically in the Little Ghost palette, the shade Little Ghost, this purple up here, just gave me a little bit of trouble. That's the only complaint I have with this one. I really enjoy, like I really enjoy these palettes, you guys. And then in this one, I don't always love a red shadow, so it could just be me, but I struggled a little bit with the red. Everything else really good. I had so much fun, like I said, creating looks and just being creative. For color story, I gave each of these a 5 out of 5. I just feel like in terms of like Halloween palettes, these color stories do truly like really make sense, and I really actually enjoy both. I think like I looked into both of these and I felt like when I first looked at them, and even now like when I look at them, sometimes I'm like, oh, I feel like there's some like repetition kind of, and I think it's just because there's like a lot of purple in this one, but really there is so much variety that within each of these palettes. And again, I really do feel like the color stories make sense to Halloween, so I gave each of them 5 out of 5 for color story, and I gave each of them a 2 out of 3 for packaging. First of all, I love the artwork. I think Odenseye always kills it with the artwork. I just wish that the Odenseye palettes had a larger mirror. That's my only complaint with the packaging. So I docked a point for the mirror size. In terms of price per gram, these each come in at $2.09 price per gram for a total official ranking of 11 for each of these palettes. Again, I really have enjoyed these. You guys know how much I love Odenseye, so I feel like I'm always gonna recommend, but I really enjoyed these ones. All right, I have 2 palettes ranked at an official palette ranking of a number of 12. So coming in at number 4, I have the Natasha Denona I Need a Nude palette. I love this so much. I really do. I did give this a 6 in terms of quality. There are some Natasha Denona palettes that I feel like as I'm creating my look, blending my shades, I feel like I struggle a little bit, but then I feel like 30 minutes to an hour later, like the look just like sinks and settles in, and I like love my look all day, and I'm like passing by mirrors and I'm like, ooh, I actually really like my eyeshadow today. That is the case with this one. I feel like as I like start to put my look together, I'm always like a little bit underwhelmed. I'm like, ugh, I don't know if I love this as much as like I had envisioned, but then I always inevitably will like go back and like look at a picture that I took that day, or I'll be like passing the mirror and I'm like, actually I really do like this. So I did give it a 6 out of 7 for quality. For color story, I gave this one a 4 out of 5. You guys, why am I so bad at math? This is actually an 11 as well, and I'm annoyed at myself, but an 11, and this one would have actually ranked at number 7. So forgive me, my math is terrible. I gave this a 4 out of 5 for color story, just because I really enjoy the color story, but I could have done without these 2 warmer shades. Like I kind of wish we had fully committed to just like straight cool toned ish like neutrals instead of like these 2. I don't know, that's just a personal preference thing. But for packaging, I did give this a 3 out of 3. I love the Natasha Denona packaging. I do really enjoy the like modern packaging as well. I feel like Natasha really did crush it with the packaging on this one. And then the Natasha Denona mini palettes come in at $3.58 price per gram, so definitely more expensive. I do apologize, this is actually number 7, which would make this number 6, and then the Little Ghost and Trick or Treat numbers 4 and 5. All right, guys, coming at number 3, it took me way too long to test this palette. It's the Odenseye Makeup Just for Fun Flora Story palette. This is such a beautiful color story. I did a look where I did like purple on the lid and then teal underneath, or like on the waterline, and I loved that look. I had no issues with any of the shades in here. I know I said I usually have issues with at least one matte in the Odenseye palettes. No issues with this palette at all. So in terms of quality, I did give this a 7. I love Odenseye's sparkly metallic special shades. In terms of color story, I did get this one a 5 out of 5 as well. I don't feel like there's any shade in here that I would switch out for a different shade. I feel like they fully committed to the purple and the green, and I love the color story. And then for packaging, I did give this one a 2 out of 3. Again, like it's a little bit cheap. It's a little bit thicker than I would prefer. And I wish the mirror was like a little bit larger. But overall, like, packaging is the least of my concerns, unless it's like super bulky or like obnoxious. I'm thinking of like the Glam Light Pie palettes, like those those would be like a 1 in terms of packaging. But anyway, price per gram in this Odenseye palette was $2.50. So we had a total overall ranking of 12. All right, and the final 2 palettes, number 1 and number 2, both ended with a final score of 13. It came down to price per gram. So coming in at number 2, we have the Natasha Denona Yucca palette. I am kicking myself that it took me so long to test this out because I freaking love Natasha Denona's take on greens. I think this is such a fun palette. I feel like if you're looking for an approachable green palette, this is such a good option. I feel like every shade is like very specifically perfect for this palette. I love the mixture of like lid toppers and metallic shades. It's so pretty and I've had so much fun playing around with this palette. So in terms of quality, I gave this one this was perfect all across the board. So 7 in terms of quality, 5 in terms of color story, and then 3 in terms of packaging. The only place this lost points was in terms of price per gram. It cost $3.58 price per gram, losing itself 2 points for a total score of 13 in the end. But I like truly cannot recommend this palette enough. I am now an affiliate with Natasha Denona, so you can save 15% always if you use my code, which is itsjustSteph. Never any pressure, but I mean, to save 15% on Natasha palettes is a big deal. All right, you guys, and the final top palette of this ranking is the palette that's on my eyes today, and I really love the way that this look came out. Like, I really enjoy it. It is the ABH Cosmos palette. I've had this in my collection for a few months now and finally got around to testing it, and I'm kind of annoyed at myself that I waited so long to finish testing this. But I really love this palette. This might be like my favorite Natasha palette. That's not Natasha, Anastasia palette that has ever launched. Like, I'm thinking like it beats ABH Jackie. Like, yes, I know, like that's a big deal. In terms of quality, I gave this a 7 out of 7. I was a little bit iffy on some of these darker shades like Dark Matter and Galaxy. Galaxy is this blue with micro glitter in it. I actually freaking love the shade. I have it in the outer third right now, and I feel like I like the micro glitter running throughout it. There's some really beautiful dual chromes in here. The shade Sun is so pretty. I created this really warm, like pinky look that I really enjoyed. I actually have Sun all over the center of my lid with Supernova on top, so the shades like layer really well on one another as well. I'm just so impressed. The one thing I will say is if you don't like a lot of kick up, I mean, you probably just shouldn't buy from Anastasia in general. There is kick up, but that doesn't bother me. Just know that it's there. In terms of color story, I gave this a 5 out of 5. I really love the color story. I think when I first looked at this, I was like, I don't know about the color story, but when you swatch it, like it's perfect. Did I itch myself and now I'm like red here? Anyway, I don't know what happened there. And then in terms of packaging, I did give this a 3 out of 3 for packaging. I feel like it's definitely better in that it's not felt like, or like that old ABH packaging that used to get stuff everywhere. I think it's really nice, simple and sleek, and it has a nice size mirror. So for what ABH packaging is, I think it's really nice. 3 out of 3 for packaging. And then in terms of price per gram, it's $3.40 price per gram. So we had a final score of 13 for the ABH Cosmos palette. And you guys, after that, that is my official ranking of the last 9 palettes that I personally have tried. I would love to know if you've tried any of these and what your thoughts were, what your experiences were, what you felt of each of these palettes, because as I mentioned in the introduction, everything is so subjective to the user. But I really enjoyed all of these. Like, there's none of the palettes in this grouping are like, I've really enjoyed my time with all of them. So I hope that you guys enjoyed today's video. Thank you so much for sticking around to watch and for supporting me and my channel, as you guys always do. I love you guys so much, and I will catch you in my next video. Bye.